Testing, testing. All right, sounds working. I'm not seeing the comment section for some reason. Ah, here it is. Oh, that's cool. I get to see it. Okay. You want to join the ACP, but you're concerned as a student that it'll affect your career. I mean, that's a valid concern, um, especially since it seems like McCarthyism is on the rise. By the way, let me know if the audio sounds good. That's a pretty valid concern, but I would say that the ACP does a particularly good job at keeping the information of its members private. And if you want to do work for the ACP under a pseudonym or something like that, that's perfectly fine. We now have a campus initiative, so if you're a university student, we definitely urge you to do stuff on campus and try to set up a club. But if you want to be more laid back, just doing community work or just support the party as a reserve, which is the lowest category of membership that we have, where you support financially, not in terms of, if you don't have the capacity to support in terms of time that you dedicate to the party, you can also support in terms of finance by just, giving $15 to the party a month. Camera quality is great. Thank you so much. Guys, this is like the first actual production quality increase I think that we've ever had. So I hope you appreciate it. I hope it's worth it. I hope it improves our content and our reach. Um, we're doing this video essay initiative where we're trying to crank out like very professional looking video essays. I have one coming out soon, and I decided to finance a camera. So it was a lot. It was like $800. It was right before I had to take up a debt that I didn't know was going to land on me so quick, which was the debt for my university, which is like 30K or some shit. So I have to take up, I have to find other sources of income to pay for that shit. But anyways, in the meantime, I got this camera to do video essays and also streaming. This is my first time streaming with it. So inshallah, all goes well. Let me see how it looks from another account. Is the audio good? Is there any echo? Usually have people complain about the audio. Oh shit, yeah, man, this looks legit. The hell? Pretty good. Pretty good. All right, guys. I need you to boost the fuck out of this stream. I'm gonna give you a good 2 or 3 hours. It's kind of echoing like a double voice. Someone says I hear no echo. All right. Double input. It could be that maybe the camera's microphone is on. I don't want to mess around with it too much, but there's a primary microphone and then there's a camera microphone. All right, I'm gonna try lowering the microphone from the camera. All right, let me know how this sounds. Is this better? Let me know in the chat. Is this better? Ah, there we go. Mashallah. Now we're cooking with gas. All right, all right, all right. I had the audio from the camera and the audio from the microphone both on. Okay. Let me just share the stream on our Discord. If you're in the chat, make sure to boost so we can get this on people's feeds. In case you don't know, I'm a communist professor. Even though that title's not necessarily correct, because I'm an adjunct professor. And people who want to be stiff asses, could gotcha at me because of that. But whatever. I'm not going to be qualifying the level of professor that I am. I'm just a professor. I'm also the Secretary of Education of the ACP, whose logo is up here on the screen. Wonderful organization. I think the fastest growing communist organization in the country. We've grown by 300% in the last 2 years. I don't know what other organization can brag of that level of growth. What's going on here? Live on TikTok. Hop in, comrades. If you're from our Discord, you're gonna see that I just sent out a message. All right, all right, all right. No Marxist prof? What do you mean? I am a Marxist prof. Am I good at math? Yeah, historically, yeah, I used to be good at math. I don't do math anymore. I don't say where I teach, for obvious reasons. I get death threats all the time. My family does too, because the people that hate us, the people that hate communism are very sick people. The people that hate communism are often very sick people. I'm talking about the people that hate it militantly. There's people that are going to be anti-communist just because they have forms of false consciousness. They've been duped by the educational system. They've been duped by the same people that have lied to them about virtually every single war we have involved ourselves in their lifetimes. But the people that are militantly anti-communist, those people are just not right in the head. And those are the ones that send me and my comrades and our families death threats regularly. So for obvious reasons, I don't mention where I teach. Sekiro, you can join the ACP by going to acp.us. It's fairly easy to join. acp.us. Love the vids. Thank you so much. The Millennial 90. Good evening. Good evening. How do you join the ACP? You go to acp.us. Carlos, I'm starting a philosophy of language class next week. Any recommendations to read to Mog? Um, there's a book called Time of the Magicians, which, if you're not familiar with philosophy, it'd be good to read. It's kind of like that one book that was popular called At the Existentialist Cafe. And Time of the Magicians deals with, if I'm not mistaken, four philosophers. One of them is Ernst Cassirer, a neo-Kantian we don't talk a lot about. The other one is Walter Benjamin, Martin Heidegger, but lastly, and important for your philosophy of language class, is Ludwig Wittgenstein. It goes through Ludwig Wittgenstein, it humanizes him, and it tells you a little bit of the background history. If not, I'd say just fucking, if you have some familiarity with philosophy, I'd say fuck it, just get into either his Tractatus or his philosophical investigations. I find the philosophical investigations better, but let's see. It's so much harder to read the chat like this. What the fuck? What the fuck? How can I change this? I don't think I can change this. Okay. Uh, how big is the ACP? The ACP is about 1,000. members, a little bit over 1,000 members. How many years in college? I did 4 to get my bachelor's. I did 2 to get my master's, and I did 3 to get my PhD. I joined. Shout out to you, Vegan Bolshevik. I see you all the time here on TikTok. Hopefully, we can see you at the upcoming party congress. Yeah, Shay's Rebellion was amazing. Um, Parenti, for those that don't know, is perhaps the most important historian of American Marxism in the last maybe 40 years. If you haven't read Parenti, you absolutely have to. It's mandatory reading, black shirts and reds. It's in the first reading list that everyone has to go through when they're in the party. Rest in peace to Parenti, one of my goats. Does the ACP have a chapter in Southwest Michigan? We have a chapter in Michigan. I also think we have a cell by that part of Michigan. How many members? How does communism not become a totalitarian one-party state? I think you have to interrogate what you understand totalitarianism to be, because it's, in my opinion, a meaningless category that uh, became popularized by Trotskyism and Trotsky's critiques of Stalin, which were actually debunked even by the CIA memorandum, because the CIA itself said that Stalin wasn't a lonesome dictator, that there was collective leadership that was involved, that was itself democratic and had some sort of accountability to the people. But it also became very popular with Hannah Arendt, who something very interesting happens with her trilogy of the origins of totalitarianism in the first 2 volumes, if I recall correctly. She's connecting the experience of Nazism to Western colonialism and capitalism in general. And then out of nowhere, and it just so happens to coincide with the beginning of the Cold War, she starts tying the experience of the Yazidis to the communists under the category of totalitarianism, and both societies being totalitarian. And some authors have speculated, like Losordo does in Western Marxism, that there's material foundations behind that in institutions like the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was trying to fund an anti-communist left, and that was funded by the CIA, the MI6, and the institutions of the deep state of all the Western imperialist countries. So yeah, totalitarianism is meaningless. Every state, the existence of the state, implies some form of totalizing authority, what Max Weber called a monopoly on violence that you can exert over people. Every society has that, not just socialism. The difference is, who does that total authority work for? And what interest does it serve? In capitalism, it's an authority that seeks to uphold an order where capital is God, where capital and money, the mammon of money, is treated as the almighty. And therefore, the class that's the personification of that, the capitalists, are the ones that are defended by the institutions of violence of the state, by the armed bodies of the state, as Lenin called it. But in socialism, it's the people, it's their sovereignty, it's their state, and how that state stands as a barricade of sovereignty against Western imperialist aggression. That's what has ultimate control, the workers, the popular masses. Socialist totalitarianism is nothing other than democracy, if you understand what democracy originally meant. Democracy originally meant power of common folk, demos, which is common folk, and kratos, which is the ability to rule over, to dictate. Socialist dictatorship or totalitarianism is nothing other than genuine democracy. Best advice for intro to philosophy class: focus on the ideas. Focus on actually genuinely being interested in the ideas and critical thinking. As a professor, I used to really get super anal when I was younger, and when in my first few years teaching, about forcing people to read and get every small minutia of detail correct. But as I've grown older and more of a realist, I realized, look, a lot of these people don't fucking read. I asked them to read stuff on the PowerPoint, and they could barely fucking read. So, who am I to make them read? I make them read the PowerPoints that I base my lectures and conversations on. But what I really, really want them to do is just to be interested in the ideas. So if you're a student going into it, or if you're a young professor thinking about how do I structure my intro to philosophy class, My opinion is that our main goal as educators, as Evald Lienkov, one of my favorite Soviet philosophers, said in a famous article, is to teach people how to think, teach them how to think creatively, get them excited about thinking, about critical thinking, about the history of ideas. And if you're able to do that, you're Gucci. You know, for once you get them on the fucking knowledge train, even if they've never read before, even if they're illiterate, once they're on the knowledge train and they're choo 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 and they're going forward, eventually, out of their own volition, they're going to start to read. That's what happened to me. I had never read a book. I hated reading. I was always a gifted student. I was 2 years ahead in all my classes, but I never read. I hated fucking reading. I hated school. And it's when I got into philosophy in college that I fell in love with knowledge. But it took me like 2 years to start reading almost like autistically every day, trying to get at least 100 pages in. ACP is growing daily. You bet your ass it is. At the Existentialist Cafe is a good book. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not bad. I haven't read Alex Karp. I've been seeing more reels about him lately. How do you think a Marxist-Leninist revolution in the U.S. would be different? Well, because it'd be occurring for the first time ever in the center of world capitalism. So far, most of the revolutions have been in the peripheries. So I think one in the US could be more impactful for the global system of capitalism. It could free up so many countries around the world that have had their struggles for socialism stifled because of the boot of US imperialism that gets put on anyone that wants to fight for sovereignty in their country and for socialism. ¿Habláis leído El Quijote or Spanish classics? Um, I've read some of El Quijote, but the truth is, besides some classical Greek literature, some 20th century existentialists, and uh, a few others, I've struggled a lot with like fantasy and with novels and things of that nature because like growing up, I never watched fantasy movies. I had parents that would encourage me watching stuff that was based on facts and on realistic things, realistic events, a lot of documentaries and things of that nature. And I think that's a real character flaw. That's a real character flaw that I have. And I've been trying slowly over the last year and a half to get more into fiction. Um, the problem is that, when I read fiction, when I sit down and read fiction, I get a tremendous guilt because I feel like that energy expenditure into reading should be going to reading theory or to reading history. And I need to get over that stupid guilt that I have whenever I engage with something that's fiction related. Even movies, I've been like trying to force myself to watch classical, like sci-fi, um, the cyberpunk style movies. It's like some of the more popular ones. I watched Blade Runner 2049 like 2 weeks ago. I wrote an article about it. I did a short video essay on it. So, point being, I've read a little bit of El Quixote. Um, I've read about El Quixote, but I haven't read it fully. And there's a million books in the classical canon of literature, let alone Spanish literature, that I wish I had more time to read. In my fourth year of philosophy, I've been supporting ACP since its creation. Glory to the ACP. Glory to the ACP, comrade. Thank you. Rest in peace, Parenti. I'm going to join the ACP tomorrow. Good shit. Good shit. Guys, it's harder to keep up with the comments like this. Oh my God, I'm so behind. What are the plans to promote and grow the ACP? Continue doing shit like this, continue doing social media, continue having our guys on the ground, do the amazing work that they're doing, and trying to use the influence of the influencers in the party to promote it. Uh, yeah. What if I can't pay the monthly dues? It's $15. It's not much. If you can't pay the monthly dues, then show yourself to be an exceptional cadre, and your chapter executive could expedite the process of cadrification. And once you become a cadre, you don't have to pay. But think about it like this, guys. The ACP is the only party that doesn't have mandatory dues. The ACP is the only party that doesn't do like these massive fundraiser campaigns. Even the dues that we do have, do the dues that we do have are like $15. If you were a member of PSL, you'd be giving like hundreds of dollars to the party every month. If you were a member of CPUSA, you'd be giving quite a bit as well. The same with all the other organizations. And that's that all those other organizations also have quite wealthy philanthropist leftists funding it. Or in the case of CPUSA, they have 100+ years of, you know, people being in the party, dying and leaving all their assets to the party in their will. So they have over $100 million in assets that they're just fucking sitting on and using to get Democrats elected and to recycle the salaries of people in leadership. ACP has zero in terms of big money funding. Zero. I know people talk shit and say that we're funded by Russia, China. No, the fuck we're not. We don't get a fucking dime from anywhere. The events that we have done, it's been leadership putting its pocket. We don't even ask other people to do it in the party. It's been leaders that have dug deep into their broke ass pocketbooks and done the events. Now we're making a little bit of money with the journal which I run, which is Red America. That pays for my party salary, and it also leaves a little bit extra for the party. And then we're also making money from the reserves. But these are all things that it's not fucking profits that we're just sitting on and enjoying luxuriously. We're like using it to invest back into the party. We're using it to do events. Like the ratio of how much we make and how much we do, if you compare it to any other organization, it's like off the charts. What are your thoughts on Stalin? These are my thoughts on Stalin. Stalin is a hero. Stalin is a hero who took a backward country and made it the second world power in the planet, right behind the US. Took a country that was mostly illiterate peasants into space travel, did insane campaigns of literacy where everyone was not only taught how to read, but the Soviet Union ended up becoming a state where 80% of the books published around the world were published in the Soviet Union. The rate of regular people and workers having subscriptions to scientific magazines and journals was the highest of anywhere else in the world. It was quite literally a cultured people. And it did that not by producing this artificial mass pop culture that we get in the West, which is just consumerist bullshit culture. It did that by bridging the gap between high culture and the culture of the mass of people. It democratized high culture. As you know, Walter Benjamin envisioned in his article on the mechanical reproduction of the work of art, that was the democratizing potential that he saw new mediums of articulating art. That was the democratizing potential that existed, and it was realized by the Soviet Union. What's the perks of joining ACP? Well, you get to fight for communism. I don't know what else to tell you. You get to help your community. You get to participate in a collective of people that now become your community, that shape your culture, that inscribe within you a culture of virtue, of being the best sort of person you could be, because that's ultimately what communism tries to do. It tries to, before you grab power, it tries to make out of the people that are in the Communist Party vessels that give you an insight into what the future subject, what the future human being is going to look like. So if you want to become a better person, if you want to deal with the rampant crisis of meaning that we have in our society where people have nothing to live for and are just going around gooning and death scrolling, if you want to deal with that and obtain the greatest source of meaning you could possibly get, which comes from being a communist, those are the perks you get with the ACP. Now, do you get material perks? Probably not. All of us would probably live much more comfortable lives if we weren't communists, if we weren't involved in the struggle. But those would be lives that would be very spiritually poor, even if they ended up being materially rich. God damn it, there's so many fucking comments. Is the ACP still Duganist and LaRoucheite? Bro, there's like so many times I have to answer this. The ACP has never been Duganist and LaRoucheite. No one that's associated with the ACP has ever been Duganist and LaRoucheite. 5 years ago, Haas and Jackson did an event with the people from the Schiller Institute, who, by the way, are always speaking in China. So if you want to cancel them over that, also cancel the whole fucking state of China, which is always inviting people from that institute to speak. They did one event because they're non-sectarian. They go and they speak to everyone, and that's it. And that's pretty much all I know about the relationship. And when it comes to Dugin, Dugin is a philosopher. Haas is a philosopher. Someone who is very interested in trying to develop new ideas to help us understand the current world, while having nonetheless a foundation in Marxism Leninism. And what he found interesting about Dugin is how he explores the notion of civilizational Daseins, the different being in the world, uh, the different logos that civilizations have. And for him specifically, he's focusing on Russian civilization. But Haas and I share a reading of a text from Stalin that's not very often read, which is called Marxism and the Problem of Linguistics. And in that text, Stalin begins to approximate the translation into the Marxist lexicon of a notion called civilization, which he argues is even deeper than the historical basis, economic basis that make up modes of production. Insofar as Haas is interested in Dugin, it's in how it is that he sees Dugin kind of recapturing, in a very unorthodox and non-Marxist way, but as a philosopher, recapturing that question of what is it that makes a civilization, and how is it that it functions almost like a meta base to the different forms of life or modes of production that have their own base and superstructure. And that inquiry starts with Stalin. But no one took it up. No one in the history of Marxism-Leninism has taken up that question explicitly. But Dugin does, even though he comes from outside of Marxism-Leninism. So that's what Haas takes from Dugin. Not even the answer, but the process of taking seriously a question that was first asked by Stalin. Do you understand that? Do you see how ridiculous it is when people sit there and call us Duginist? How do you find your chapter representative? I think you're put in contact with your chapter representative automatically when you join. If not, literally just message me. Tell me what state you're in, and I can put you in contact. Someone said they act like CPU, like ACP's funding dwarfs PSLs and CPUSA. It's because we're fucking good in media. That's literally it. It's because we're good at media. Um, and we win a lot of people and we have a lot of influence in the media. Guys, think about it like this. Even if you hate the ACP and you hate us, you still talk about us all the fucking time. We're not a zero on the left that people can ignore. Everyone fucking talks about the ACP. Everyone talks about the fucking ACP. The Democratic Socialists do, the PSL people do, the FRSO people do, the CPUSA people do. The CPUSA talk about the ACP so much and are so worried about the ACP that the whole critique that we had about the CPUSA for years is now being arrived at by Joe Sims And I'm not gonna be like Hawes, where he thinks he's sincere. I think it's bullshit. I think Joe Sims is full of shit, and he's only accepting this critique because he sees that the ACP, which is uh, the real continuation of the Communist Party and its legacy, it's the reconstitution of the CPUSA after it liquidates itself. It sees that we're getting motion. And you know how scary it is for these people that have millions of fucking dollars and tens of millions of dollars in assets to see this ragtag of young people who come out of nothing, who came out of nowhere, but who are so passionately and faithfully aligned to the ideas and to the principles of Marxism Leninism that they're fighting and sacrificing and putting everything on the line to fight for it and gaining traction because of it, even though we have nothing materially to gain from this and have no material backing. Can you imagine the fear that that inspires in the gatekeepers of the old left? The gatekeepers of the old left, because that's what they are, because their shit has never worked. And instead of welcoming the young people that are actually gaining some motion and popularizing communism, like Jackson is, like Eddie is, and others are, instead of welcoming us and saying, well, how can we work together? How can we use your new skills with our old infrastructure and build the communist movement? Instead of doing that, they're just fucking gatekeepers. They feel threatened. Their fiefdoms and their funding and their members who they feel entitled to, they feel threatened, and so they attack us. But can you imagine if that wasn't the case? If they weren't fucking gatekeepers and they just were open like we are? Let me tell you guys something. Let me tell you guys something. I was recently, this past weekend, I was in Chicago because we're doing a massive Marxism conference in Chicago. And you know what I was trying to do in this trip? I was trying to speak to all of the representatives of the US left. Literally everyone. Trots, DSA people, PSL, Marciite people, FRSO people, everyone. Absolutely everyone. Community centers, um, bookstores, university people. I went fucking everywhere. I spent 2.5 days literally going everywhere trying to meet with everyone. Do you know that the fuckers at DSA, at PSL, at FRSO, they wouldn't even entertain the idea of meeting with us? The Green Party, which has 250,000 members and has gotten well over 1 million votes before, they're not only meeting with us, but they have prominent speakers. Their vice president, Butch Ware, Dr. Butch Ware, is going to be speaking at the conference. Some of their biggest in like Guy Christensen, your favorite guy, I think is his ad. Very popular here on TikTok. Rathbone, Nick Cruz from RBN. They're speaking at the conference. They're welcoming us with open arms. But people who purport to be so much closer to us ideologically because they call themselves Marxist Leninists, like the PSL or the FRSO, or people like DSA, they wouldn't even fucking speak to me. They wouldn't even speak to me. That's the purity fetish. It's in those moments where you realize, well, literally all the theory that I've been writing for the last 6 years, it's absolutely correct. You know what it is to not even entertain talking to someone else while the fuckers at the deep state are saying they're going to come after all communists? There's literally a return of McCarthyism. They're not going to discriminate whether you're a Marciite trot in the PSL or a tanky Stalinist in the ACP. They're going to fucking come after everyone. And we're the ones that are mature enough to say, hey, let's fucking try to build a coalition of some sort. You keep your organizational sovereignty. We don't want to bring you into our organization, and we don't want our people to go to yours. We keep our sovereignty. We keep some sort of a distance between the organizations, but we open lines of communication so that we can work together. So that when the state cracks down, we don't all get fucked and squashed like cockroaches because we're bickering with one another, which is exactly what the state wants us to do. And these fuckers don't even want to entertain having a conversation. That's the state of the US left. That's the state of the US left. The ACP is not going to fix its reputation on the left because what's called the left are these gatekeepers that I just talked about, who are the ones that manipulate through rumors, through decontextualized or even fabricated text. You know, a lot of the tweets that you've seen from Jackson Hinkle, a lot of them are doctored. A lot of them are not even real. We have corrected and proved this a million times, but they don't fucking care because it's not about what is true. It's about how they can use images to manipulate you. This is where like French theory is important. It's about the simulacrum. The distinction between truth and this sphere of illusion and simulation has collapsed. People don't give a fuck about what the truth is anymore. They don't. Because we've said the truth a million times. We've debunked the claims about red brown, about fascist, about it being only socially conservative. We've debunked every single claim. We've shown through facts what the truth is. But people don't fucking care because it's not about what the truth is to them. It's about how things are seen as being seen. It's about second order observation. It's about how they're going to be seen by their friend groups and these small cliques that are disconnected from society at large. It's about how they feel threatened at the top and feel like they have to protect their small leftist fiefdoms. And so the reputation of the ACP, what more can we do? For 2 years, for 2 years, we have shown you what we're all about. We're about serving our communities, building dual power, standing against US imperialism, and trying to popularize anti-imperialist and socialist ideas. And if people still think that we are this horrendous thing, I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing we can do. There's literally, what more can we do besides continuing to do the good work that we're doing? At some point, people have to realize that they're just fucking looking at shadows on a cave wall. We're back to Plato's allegory. They're looking at shadows on a cave wall, but what's worse for these organizations is that they're slaves who think they're free, but they're still in a cave. It's a labyrinth now. It's not just a cave. Does no one want to debate me? No one has requested. Are there only fans here? Oh, Jesus Christ, only fans. Um, no one wants to debate me. No one wants to try to call me out. Yeah, yeah. Laugh all you want. Golden Parenti. God damn it. Let's see. What the fuck? I don't know who Globoid TV chat is. Bro, I get a better camera and suddenly no one wants to debate me. The TikTok communist scene is dominated by anti-ACP discourse. Well, bring them on. Look, if you guys are connected to any of these anti-ACP people, send them this stream. I am more than happy to debate with them. We don't even have to call it a debate, a comradely conversation. I would literally talk to anyone, except Zionists. But anyone besides that, I'll talk to them. Did ACP try to join SolidNet? The problem with SolidNet is that it's controlled by the Greek Communist Party, which is called the KKE. And the KKE thinks that Russia and China are imperialist. And they control a lot of the people who get to come in and out of, or who get to come into SolidNet. And so we knew we were never going to have really an opportunity to join. Unless like the Chinese faction or the Russian faction, because the KPRF is also in SolidNet, but there's this contradiction in SolidNet between the KPRF, who's obviously pro-SMO and pro-China, and the KKE, the Greek communists, who are against them. And if the KPRF would have won that battle, we would have probably been in SolidNet. But what is kind of happening is that like Sovereign is taking the place of SolidNet, and we were one of the founders of Sovereign. A lot of them refuse to engage with you. That's the thing. Well, ask why. Would you rather spend the day with a left com or a trot? Probably a trot. I don't know who Globoid TV is, but as a general rule, I respect people who lift. If you have the discipline to actually lift consistently, I respect you. Respect points go up if you lift. If you don't lift at all, and you don't hit the gym, even inconsistently, like once or twice a week, it's hard. It's very hard to respect you. I'll respect you because I'm a philosopher and I treat everyone with equality and dignity. But yeah, yeah. That's honestly, you want to know what the line that distinguishes ACP from the other organizations are? You know, thanks to Globoid TV is helping ACP develop newer theory. You know what the line is that distinguishes us from the rest of the left? All of our leaders lift. Literally all of our leaders lift. Haas is at the gym 3 hours a day. Haas is literally at the gym 3 hours a day. It's insane. Um, Eddie, Eddie's also he's at the gym for like an hour and a half a day, and then he's like wrestling for like 6 hours a day. I'm probably the least fit because I go to the gym maybe 3 to 4 times a week, and then I do cardio like almost every day. I mainly do cardio just so that I can eat bad. That's the truth. I like sweets too much. I like greasy food a lot, and yeah, I do a lot of cardio just so that I can continue doing that and not get obese. Um, Noah also lifts, and Jackson lifts and is jacked. So there you go. That's the main difference. That's why everyone hates the ACP because we lift. All right. Fruitbird, I think, was requesting. Why does that sound familiar? Why does that sound familiar? Fruitbird. Where's Fruitbird? They left. What can I do, guys? No one wants to talk to me. I go to Chicago to talk to all the leftist orgs. No one wants to talk to me. Oh, there's Fruitbird.
I don't know what
Hey, how's it
happened.
going, Fruitbird?
Hi, I'm good and you?
I can't hear anything.
Hello? I'm talking. Can anyone hear me?
Can you guys hear something? Someone says I can hear. All right, fuck. Oh, why can't I hear anything?
Hello, hello?
Microphone, audio. Let's see if I can change this.
It's probably because of TikTok live studio or something.
All right, can you speak, Fruitbird? Can you speak? Are you speaking? Is Fruitbird speaking? Now they can't hear Fruitbird. Manda binga. Uh, Microphone. Primary speaker. Can you try speaking now? I just slimed up Fruitbird. I'm sorry. I'm gonna put it back to what it was. And now Fruitbird is gone. So sad. Does anyone else want to request to see if we can adjust this? All right, Fruitbird is back.
Hello?
Are people hearing Fruitbird?
Fuck, not again.
Bruv, what's going on? All right.
Why are you saying Fruitbird? You're shaking.
Okay, now I
I
can
heard
hear
my
you.
voice.
Holy shit,
Okay.
it's too loud. I'm hearing an echo. Are you guys hearing an
Yes.
echo? In the comments, let me know.
Hello?
Fruitbird, can you speak?
Yeah.
All right, is everyone hearing an echo, or is it just me?
Hello? Is it. I don't even have my VPN on. So. Oh, it could be. Okay.
It's a
Is it
poltergeist.
good? Is it good now?
Yeah, I think it's good now. You can go ahead. What's your question? Why do you hate us?
I don't. I don't hate you. I barely even know you guys. Um, I think everything that comes from the Imperial Core, is sometimes just, it's like pulled away from the reality of the people in the global south. That's one of my biggest critique. And yes, I did it. I did debate, quote unquote, with Eddie, but I was trolling, to be honest. But I do have a lot of critiques as somebody from the global south,
Where in the
and
global south are you?
I'm in Argentina.
Um, that's that's definitely the global south. It's like the world's first fifth world country. Uh,
Mm,
uh,
I know there's been a lot of people that are not from here saying that things like, oh, you're all white and
yeah, I
you're
know, I
all,
know.
yeah,
Argentina is nowhere near as
upper
racist as the
class.
U.S. They're also not
Yeah, that was the whole
just
thing.
Zionists because of Malay. There's a lot of anti-Zionists in Argentina. It's a
Yeah.
caricature. Yeah.
Yes, and
I
they
don't
don't know
think, and
the
I'm
history.
remembering now because of your chain of argumentation, the conversation that was had, and your perspective is one that I labeled as standpoint epistemology, which means that you get to have unique insights into what you consider to be truth on the basis of the specific standpoint that one has.
Yes.
And that no one else who comes from a different position is able to fully understand the the insight that you have because of your standpoint, because of your position. And so now you're kind of reiterating the same thing, that because we're in the global north or in the US, you have to be automatically distrustful of anything that someone from the US says. Well, that
Mm,
the
not
basis of that
particularly.
framework itself comes from Ivy League institutions in the US. It comes from Harvard.
Yeah,
Standpoint
I'm aware.
epistemology gets developed by theorists in the West, in the global North,
In their general
as a way of
context.
promoting a compatible left that pushes tribalism and that precludes any possibility of having a common denominator based in class and material objective things that we all share be
Exactly.
the objective point of congregating people for politics. And I think that's terribly wrong. And if your point is going to be that, well, you're never going to fully understand the experience of someone living in the global south, which is a weird point to make for
No,
me because I'm from Cuba. Um, there's going to be
that's
always in
fine.
any form of
Then
communication a constitutive gap. In communication, communication happens through miscommunication. Every form of communication is a form of miscommunication. What you put out as a concept or a sentence, when you tell your partner, I love you, when you tell them that, the way they register that is never going to be the same as the form that you think
yes.
what you're saying is going to take. So now that we can say that there's a basic constitutive miscommunication that exists in all forms of communication, that communication itself can only
Yeah,
exist
I
through
agree.
this constitutive error, to say that someone in the global north can't produce knowledge that could be meaningful for the global south, or that knowledge from the global south would never be fully understood by someone in the global north
No, that's
because
not what
of.
I mean at all.
Okay, so what do you mean?
Um, because I lived in the U.S. for a certain time and then I moved back here. So I do notice that disconnect. That differences in also the general leftism in the U.S. is not. It's. I wouldn't even consider it leftism. It's more like centrism. In comparison to here and our historical context.
What does that have to do
In
with the
like
ACP? I don't disagree. There's,
that
in
you
fact, I hold
wanna.
that there's no left in the US.
Yeah, I know. Um, what that has to do with the ACP is I know that one of your main goals is to attract a lot of white workers, particularly.
Where does it
Um,
say that that's one of our main goals?
that's
We
what I've
literally
been
have,
reading.
I'll tell you this, fruit bird, Argentinian
Yeah, go
fruit
ahead.
bird, churrasco fruit bird. I'll tell you this, we have literally one of the most diverse parties out of any in the. We have one of our most famous influencers, Jackson, is physically white, spiritually black, spiritually African. Um, but we have one guy that's very popular as an influencer, but literally almost everyone else is a person of color or black. If you come to most of our chapter meetings, they're extremely diverse, both in terms of gender. I guess in terms of gender, they could be more diverse, but in
Yeah,
terms of
that's
race,
another
most
issue.
of our party, we have the proportion of people that are white in the country, which is like 70%. Jackson is Eurasian. There we go. The proportion of people that are, if there was proportionate representation of all races in the country in the ACP, we would have a
Yeah.
disproportionate representation of white people. Most of the people in the party are not white. Jackson Hinkle is spiritually Mexican. Yeah, yeah. He's spiritually something other than white, you know. Um, but in any case, yeah, this is a weird claim to make that we're trying to appeal to the white working class. We're just trying to appeal to the working class writ large. On the contrary, there's
Well, I mean,
intensified movement of
um,
racialism and white supremacy that's getting very popular on X.
yeah.
None of the leftists give a fuck to fight against it. We're the only ones that are going toe to toe against these people, demoralizing them, attacking them. And someone like Nick Fuentes, who's literally a white supremacist, he had a concurrent viewership of 80,000 to 100,000 people on his lives, which I can understand. There's like 50 fucking people here. So
Yeah.
I can't fathom that level of scope. But because of the work of ACP associated influencers and groups in demoralizing his community, his concurrent lives are now 10% of what they were, which means that we have played a part in decapitating by 90% one of the biggest forces of white supremacy in this country. Do you see how absurd it is to label us a party that tries to appeal only to white workers?
Um, okay, I think I have to clarify that I am not attacking. I said that I don't hate you guys, and these are just observations, and they are not personal attacks. Um, so just to get that out of the way, this is a conversation and it is not a debate. If you want to have a debate, I am not your girl, but I would like to have a conversation where you where people can share their experiences, their political experiences, um and as working class, because that's what unites us all in the end. And historically, we have been, I mean, here in Argentina, we've been able to get like free education, free college, public transport, which has been set back by a lot of um, liberal, liberal socio-economic policies from the U.S. and from other also imperial core countries, but mainly from that. And I also don't have a problem with like fourth positionists. Or is that my phone?
No, that's TikTok. It asked me to put a little puzzle thing uh,
Oh,
if I don't move the mouse. Go ahead.
um, I don't have a particular problem with fourth positionist either. I mean
Like
fourth, yeah, fourth. But
the fourth
I do
political
have a
theory.
problem with I'm talking about Duhin, no sé cómo decir su nombre en inglés.
Doing.
Duhin.
La cuarta
My
teoría política.
critiques to him, yeah. He doesn't. I
Dugin
know
is pretty
he.
popular in Argentina.
Yes, he is. Because he really likes Peron,
Yep.
and I understand why. Um, I just don't think he is taking into consideration the downfall of Peronismo. So there's a lot of we have a lot of Trotskyists here, which I don't have a problem with, but uh, they're good at organizing and getting people to be out on the streets and feeding the poor, feeding the unhoused. But there's this disconnect from reality, um, from people in the imperial core and people that are not from there. that just I think that's also what creates that division. Um, and these are just observations that I've been making, and just by talking to other ACP members, a lot of behaviors that I think will be a liability in the future.
All right, to reiterate what the chat is saying, because I'm a true Democrat, I'm I'm gonna have to ask you what the fuck are you talking about? Like what disconnect are you referring to?
The
What is the thing that's
division
disconnected?
between I guess, the way that you see your reality and your experience as opposed to somebody that grows up in the middle of like the farmlands, I don't know, in El Chaco or something. And that's what happens here. Um, how are you
Okay,
going
but what
to
is
connect
politically
to those
meaningful
people?
about that difference? She's saying we're
It's
privileged. Is that what you're
meaningful.
saying? Are you saying we're privileged? You just said that you guys
No,
have
not
like,
privileged. I don't like that term.
okay, so what are you saying? Do you want to say it in
There's a
Spanish?
can I?
Dale, dilo.
Ok, bueno, lo que más estoy observando es que hay mucha, hay mucha división, eh, como vos ya lo dijiste, en la izquierda. Y especialmente va a haber esa división en las izquierdas de diferentes países por problemas culturales. Em, y también bueno, por mucho, ¿cómo se llama? Mucho contexto histórico. Y a lo que voy es que acá la misma división de las que vos hablás entre diferentes partidos socialistas de allá, acá también pasa lo mismo. Eh, acá no tenemos ningún partido marxista-leninista, o sea, no tenemos ni uno, y los que sí existieron ya están, o sea, ya se dividieron. Por eso, lo que hizo Perón fue apelar eh, a a la gente que históricamente, o sea, nadie las escuchaba. Y creo que ustedes también están tratando de hacer lo mismo, pero también tienen que ver todo lo que hizo Perón. Eh, pero también
Pero ahí lo que está
todo,
planteando es fundamentalmente la posición del populismo. I'm going to say it in English, which what
sí,
she's been talking about,
yo ya,
the gap that she's referring to. She says that there's genuine cultural differences that exist between the lefts of different countries, but there's also the fact that in Argentina, she says that the same dynamic between the different lefts that we would articulate ourselves experiencing here also exists in Argentina. And that she felt that in Argentinian history, the person that spoke for those that feel disenfranchised in a very populist style manner was Perón, and that she sees us doing something of that nature in the ACP, and she's about to explain what she considers to be limited in that. So,
ya. Lo que pienso es que em, de las diferentes maneras que falló varios programas eh, basados en el marxismo, lo que se tiene que aprender es por qué cayeron, eh, más allá de la influencia de la CIA y del FBI, ¿no? Eh, que bueno, tampoco fueron los únicos actores que no querían que se organizaran las masas. Y hay que tener el contexto eso, porque al final del día eh, Perón, eh, Perón le pasó exactamente lo que le pasó a Stalin. Eh, Empezó a dudar de absolutamente todas las personas alrededor de él, se volvió paranoico, ya no confiaba en nadie y las personas a su alrededor empezaron a morir y se quedó totalmente aislado y no pudo terminar ese proyecto de nacionalizar al país. Eh, lo cual me parece muy importante también que lean de diferentes países que han tratado de nacionalizar sus empresas, aunque ahora sé que China está tratando de hacer otra estrategia, porque acá no nos dejan instalar sus compañías o sus empresas, pero eso ya es fuera de tema. Pero mi crítica es eso, que hay como una desconexión entre, entre la gente común y corriente y también esta apelación a lo académico eh, como algo importante. Y un ejemplo rápido, y ya te suelto porque creo que estoy tomando mucho tiempo con esto, pero hay un doctor súper famoso acá que la madre creció en un pueblo súper pobre y él fue el primero en su generación en terminar la universidad. Y ella una vez se enfermó y él la trató eh, como paciente y le empezó a hablar así con todo este lenguaje, eh, ¿cómo se llama? Científico. Y ella como persona, como es de pueblo, que nunca fue a la escuela, que nunca terminó ni siquiera la primaria, eh, le dijo, bueno, para un poco que eh, si así le hablas a tus pacientes, estás mal, o sea, lo estás tratando como si fueran personas de tu mismo nivel académico. Y eso me parece que también es una gran crítica a la academia, a las personas que tienen la posibilidad de estudiar. Y cuando digo esto, no estoy hablando de los privilegios, eh,
Sí,
porque
ya
es una
entendí más o
realidad.
menos por dónde vienes y lo puedo traducir
Sí,
si no te molesta. So
sí,
part
está
of what
bien.
she was saying first was that one of the faults of Perón is that he became extremely paranoid of everyone around him as he was carrying out the process of nationalization and just started basically purging those around him, which I'm not totally sure how that applies to the ACP. And then she compared that to Stalin, which I think is incorrect because Stalin's purges were actually substantive. In the 30s, there was real movements within the Soviet aspects of the Soviet party leadership to try to
Yeah.
depose of Stalin. And at a time when they were preparing to defend themselves against an invasion from the German Nazis, such a coup would have been fatal to the Soviet state. And the reason why the people tried to organize those coups were also rational, because they deeply disagreed with the idea that you can build socialism in one country. So for
Yeah.
them, the existence of the Soviet state was also at stake. They were wrong, but I think they were not insincere. And so they did try to carry out acts to overthrow Stalin because they saw that as what was
Yeah.
necessary in order to
Yeah, I
preserve
agree.
the Soviet Union. And Stalin, purged those people. And I think he was very humanitarian about it at first. For instance, before Trotsky ever gets the ice pick in the head, he gets sent to Siberia. Then he gets exiled. And it's only years and years after when Trotsky was able to travel in fascist Italy and Nazi Germany freely, when most communists were being thrown in concentration camps, which was the
That's not
reason why
suspicious at all.
concentration camps were built. Yes, it's factually true. He was able to travel with his daughter, I
Yeah,
believe,
yeah,
or
I know.
son. Um, then all of his propaganda against Stalin was basically copied and pasted by the Yazis. It's only many years after that Stalin decides to turn to the ice pick as a solution. But that's, I don't think, comparable to just a paranoiac getting rid of those around him in order to preserve power or something like that. In
No,
fact,
I mean,
if
I'm
there's a
not.
critique,
Sorry.
if there's a critique that I think you can give of Stalin was that he had an inclination to further democratize the party bureaucracy and to input greater educational requirements upon some of the lower, mid, and even upper level bureaucrats. And he wasn't able to successfully do that. It was actually some of the Khrushchevite factions that would later carry out de-Stalinization that prevented him from greater democratizing and de-bureaucratizing the party.
Yeah.
And so you could criticize him for that. You can criticize him for not
No,
undermining the conditions
sorry.
within the party that
I
would have led
don't.
to someone like Khrushchev.
I'm not anti-Stalin, by the way. Um, and I wouldn't even consider these critiques just observations. That could be helpful. As you move forward in what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's fair.
Uh,
The other part that you said towards the end, now it's slipping my mind. The second point, you had made the point about Perón and Stalin, and then you made a point right after.
yeah,
Can you remind me of what
and
that was?
the paranoia was valid because there
After the paranoia
there
point.
was involvement from British forces. After sorry, no, I have very bad memory. I'm not gonna remember what I said. Um, but fuck, what did I say? Después de la paranoia, creo que de la desconexión.
Ah,
La
sí, la
desconexión
historia,
con la
la historia que
clase.
contaste del doctor y
Sí, sí,
okay.
sí.
Then she said
Como,
that part of the disconnection is a disconnection that exists between the language that like leftists and leftist academics use to articulate their ideas, and then the language of the common people. And she told the story of this doctor that was treating a peasant. Um, and the peasant lady told the doctor that, well, if you speak to me in the scientific jargony lingo, if you speak to everyone like this, no one's going to really understand what the hell you're talking about. And there's a truism to that in politics as well, that if you're trying to build a mass popular politics as a leftist, and you're using all these jargony, highfalutin, educated terms, you're not going to be able to connect with people. And that's right, and this is something that I think about a lot. I'm an academic, I write books, I write academic articles, but I also do things like TikTok debates. I do TikTok
yeah,
short videos, and we have other people who do that as well. And the way we think about it is a helpful metaphor. One of my friends in a communist creator community called Your Communist Friend, there's a helpful metaphor that he has of a funnel where at the top you have the most basic and almost slop-like content. And I do this sort of content where I'm like, look at these nice big buildings in China. This is what communism does. Why does it do it? Well, because
yeah,
they can subvert the profit motive because they have a communist party in power. Yada,
yeah,
yada,
and
yada.
that helped.
And that sort of shit goes viral. It brings people in. But then as people participate more in your media ecosystem, they go from like watching TikToks to maybe watching a stream to maybe watching a video essay that's well edited to then maybe reading an article to then
Yeah,
maybe reading an academic article, then a book, and then joining the party and becoming someone who's like has to study militantly. But yeah, in order to grab people, you can't just throw them into the last stage. You have to grab them. Honestly, you don't even grab people by speaking to them or through arguments. People are convinced at a much more intuitive level. Something usually fucked up has to happen in their life that shatters all of the preconceptions and opens them up to new
Yeah.
avenues. And then they get
Album
hooked
does
by
that
something.
to a lot of people,
You
yeah.
know, it's like you're walking and you're poor and then you encounter a mural of Che Guevara and you're like, well, this is kind of cool. Let me look into this person. Uh, and then you learn you have to be before you go through the funnel of learning the arguments and the reasons for being a communist. I think you become a communist at a much deeper spiritual or intuitive level before you develop the
Yeah.
rational capacities to understand Marxism or Marxism Leninism or something like that.
Yeah, if you start to talk to people, um like like what I do with my mom, and I started to talk to her about communism without using communist terms. Uh, she agrees with what I have to say and about um, just the experience of it. And my grandfathers, my grandparents as well. People understand. People that have had to work or had been sold here from like the ages of 4, they understand what Perón did. Um, and I know there's a lot of critiques against him, but and I know a lot of leftists critique him, but it was an important step forward towards a larger movement that got people to organize, that got teenagers to organize in their college, in their high schools, in in primary schools, and it's that sentiment of we're all being crushed, that ultimately, yeah, it it does unite people, and we all know that counter forces are really good at causing division as well.
Yeah.
um
And look, any form of left wing in Argentina, I think it's going to have to build itself up on the legacy of the rational kernels of Peronism. But thank you so much for coming on, Fruitbird. It's been
yeah,
quite a bit that we've been chatting, and I have a few guests here that I also want to bring up.
yes,
So,
of course. Thank you for having me.
of course, see you
Goodbye.
next time.
Hola, buenas.
Hola, ¿cómo andamos?
¿Puedo responder en español?
Sí, sí, sí.
Quería preguntarle, como de ascendencia cubana que es usted, ¿qué opina sobre la nueva política económica que quiere desarrollar el Partido Comunista Cubano? ¿Le parece una revisión a los principios marxistas
No, no,
ortodoxos?
no, no. Para nada, al contrario, ellos han sido muy claros de que se están basando en la experiencia de China y Vietnam. Hice cuando salieron los 70 y pico puntos de la transformación económica, hice un artículo sobre esto que está en mi Substack. Eh, Puedes buscarlo en Substack. El Substack se llama Filosofía en Crisis. Es, lo hice hace 2 o 3 semanas y también hice unos videos sobre este tema. El problema es que ya Cuba llevaba desde el 2014 desarrollando zonas especiales económicas en las que probó un modelo chino, como mismo lo hizo China, porque China empezó en zonas especiales económicas antes de hacer la reforma y apertura del 78. Y han habido, creo que, 2 provincias en las que en los últimos 10 años han invitado al capital de Brasil, eh, ruso, chino, venezolano, mexicano, español, a invertir en Cuba. Y han tratado de dirigirlo, de manejarlo a través de la dirección del partido. Y ha sido un experimento fructífero. Y es en base de ese experimento que viene la nueva política económica de Cuba y del Partido Comunista, que es una cosa que ellos llevan estudiando desde los años 90, el modelo chino. Entonces no lo veo como una ruptura, ni tampoco como algo que fue puramente o meramente provocado por la intensificación de la agresión estadounidense en contra de Cuba, sino lo veo como algo que estoy sorprendido que les tomó tanto tiempo para empezar a adoptar esta política, que ya desde hace 2 o 3 décadas llevan pensando implementar.
Y una pregunta más. ¿Crees que este modelo de transformación económica orientada, digamos que más hacia el modelo chino, vietnamita, tiene limitaciones dentro de Cuba? ¿O que se podrá, digamos que aplicar sin ningún tipo de obstáculo que pueda impedir su propiedad? Me estoy trabando, lo sé, pero
Yo creo que lo principal va a ser de que yo creo que esta experiencia va a poder traer bastante prosperidad a Cuba. Cuba va a ser un país que no es China. China en 3, 4 décadas ha podido transformarse de manera increíble. Creo que con Cuba, por su tamaño, si tiene acceso al capital extranjero y lo puede manejar y controlar como lo ha hecho el Partido Comunista de China, creo que en 5 a 10 años puede transformarse completamente. Pero lo importante va a ser el tema de la conciencia. Si se puede mantener eh, la conciencia socialista en el pueblo y si se puede darse a sí mismo la, no la responsabilidad, sino el crédito de la transformación que está ocurriendo en la sociedad. Es muy importante que la gente vea la transformación, que es como se ve en China, no como un producto de la introducción del capitalismo o de las relaciones de propiedad capitalistas o de los mercados, sino un producto de cómo el partido ha podido manejar esas esas nuevas instituciones dentro de un sistema socialista. Entonces creo que eso sería lo principal, mantener en la conciencia del pueblo el hecho de que estos son nuevas instituciones, instituciones de carácter universal porque han existido en otras formas de vida que no son, que no son capitalistas, ¿no? Han existido en formas de vida feudales, comunales, esclavistas y en el socialismo han existido en Vietnam, en China y anteriormente en Yugoslavia. Y la función que obtienen es parte de cómo es integrado dentro de una forma de vida específica que tiene un telos, un propósito específico, y ese propósito es el que dicta cómo es que va a funcionar. Igual que si le das un martillo a un psicópata que quiere romperle la cabeza a alguien, ese martillo va a funcionar de una manera diferente que si se lo dieras a una persona que quiere construir una casa, ¿no? Entonces, mantener en la conciencia del pueblo el hecho de que este desarrollo positivo es el fruto del trabajo del Partido Comunista y no el fruto de un revisionismo ni de un paso hacia detrás y una adopción del capitalismo.
y una última pregunta, para no alargar mucho mi intervención. ¿Y usted cree que, por ejemplo, en el caso de la Unión Soviética, con las políticas de liberalización económica, como bien podría ser la glasnost, ¿no? Surgen otros tipos de actores, como los oligarcas y demás, que entran en contradicción con el modelo de planificación central y al final son aquellos que tienen protagonistas en el derrumbe del propio sistema soviético? ¿Crees que en Cuba el partido será capaz de tomar las riendas, será capaz de subordinar estos nuevos actores que vienen de la inversión privada, de descentralización
La,
económica y demás?
la diferencia principal de la experiencia de Glasnost y Perestroika en Rusia y de la reforma y apertura en China es la cuestión de la dictadura del partido. Eh, en Rusia hubo un proceso de eh, liberación que fue no solo económica, sino también política, y desmanteló la legitimidad del Partido Comunista de la Unión Soviética y se abrió un capital político, como lo llamaba Mao, eh, a fuerzas extranjeras, capitalistas y imperialistas, ¿no? En China nunca hubo eso. En China siempre se mantuvo la dictadura del partido, o sea, la dictadura del proletariado y del campesinado en el caso chino, y nunca se dejó de que las fuerzas del capitalismo y del imperialismo tomaran ni mismísima traducción de su poder económico a un poder político. Lo que le pasa en China es de que el poder económico que puede tener los sujetos capitalistas no es capaz de ser traducido en poder político. Cuando tratan de hacerlo como lo trató de hacer Jack Ma, se lo echan. Le quitan toda su propiedad y lo hacen un obrero cotidiano. Entonces, esa es la cuestión principal. Hay que acordarse de que ya desde Lenin se entendía de que la fórmula de entender la base de la sociedad como la economía política cambia en el periodo del socialismo porque hay una autoconciencia sobre la forma de vida y lo que viene siendo más importante es la política, no la economía. Entonces se puede tener empresas capitalistas, pero si tienes en el ámbito político una dictadura del Partido Comunista, vas a estar bien. Los problemas van a surgir si, por ejemplo, si Cuba empieza a hablar de una democracia multipartidista, si empieza a invitar las ONGs para que hagan promoción de democracia o de derechos humanos y toda esa porquería. Ahí sí es cuando me preocuparía, pero eh, la apertura económica no tiene necesariamente que tomar la forma que tomó en Glasnost y Perestroika en la Unión Soviética, puede tomar la forma que ha tomado en Vietnam y en China, que tomó hasta en Yugoslavia, porque Yugoslavia para derrotarla no fue, tuvieron que caerle a bombazos, ¿no? Que no fue como la Unión Soviética. Entonces, y eso que Yugoslavia se liberalizó mucho más que China. Entonces no creo que eso va a pasar en Cuba.
Pero bueno, quizás yo no estoy muy informado sobre el sistema político que mantiene China actualmente, pero al final y al cabo hay una contradicción, ¿no? O sea, me refiero, el Estado controla el suelo de lo que comprende todo el territorio chino, pero a la vez que hay cooperativas y empresas estatales, hay empresas privadas que mantienen una explotación de tipo capitalista, ¿no? Mediante la extracción de plusvalor, y hay como una forma de acumulación. E incluso, digamos que
Sí,
esto es
porque es una
capitalismo,
sociedad socialista, no es una sociedad comunista. Ellos entienden, en China se ha desarrollado una nueva teoría de las tres etapas del socialismo como fase intermedia de la transición del capitalismo al comunismo, y ellos entienden a ellos mismos a estar en la transición entre la primera y la segunda etapa de esas tres etapas del socialismo. Eh, Significa que se va a mantener explotación en partes de la sociedad, pero que esa explotación va a ser regulada y va a tener que en última instancia beneficiar los fines sociales de la trayectoria de la sociedad. Y eso va a crear las condiciones para la posibilidad de abolir esa explotación en el futuro. Entonces, sí, es una contradicción, ¿no? Eh, pero al fin y al cabo somos marxistas y el marxismo postula de que todo, sea en la naturaleza o en la sociedad o en el pensamiento humano, todo está dictado por contradicciones que son el motor de todo cambio, y si hay algo que es constante es la constancia del cambio. Entonces, no debemos temer a esa contradicción, debemos entender cómo manejarla y crear las condiciones para que en unas décadas, cuando haya un cambio de contexto, podamos superarla de manera dialéctica.
Entonces, una pregunta corta para terminar, porque en España, como entiendes, es muy temprano, más que tarde, diría. Entonces, ¿usted cree que el Partido Comunista Chino está preparado para dar el salto hacia la nacionalización completa de los medios de producción, tal y como ocurrió en la Unión Soviética con la NEP a a los planes quinquenales de Stalin. ¿Usted cree que
Absolutamente no. Creo que, bueno, empezando lo que se le llama en inglés the commanding heights, las partes más importantes de la economía ya están nacionalizadas. Creo que tienen las condiciones para empujar un poco más, para empezar a limitar formas de explotaciones que todavía siguen en China? Hay una izquierda en el Partido Comunista Chino que yo tengo un poco de simpatías con esa izquierda que dice de que el proceso que están llevando a cabo quizás se pudiera mover un poquito más rápido, pero no creo que están ni remotamente cerca de poder abolir todas las formas de explotación y de empresas que hay en China, por la razón principalmente de que el capitalismo mundial todavía tiene fuerza y todavía domina, y ese tipo de transición, creo que sus premisas es un mundo en el que ya el capitalismo mundial, el imperialismo, empieza a perder o pierde completamente su fuerza global. Y como eso no ha pasado todavía, no creo de que... Es una dialéctica en la que el socialismo puede avanzar etapas mientras que se va debilitando el capitalismo global. Y eso es una dialéctica que los chinos entienden muy bien. Y yo no me voy a poner aquí a decir de que hay un botón que tiene Xi Jinping que puede abolir toda la explotación y de que no lo está apretando. Eso no creo que en este momento sea viable, pero sí hay cosas que China como proyecto en constante desarrollo, quizás hay cosas que pueden hacer más y quizás en los próximos meses o en los próximos años, como China es una sociedad que se desarrolla y cambia tan rápidamente, quizás en estos próximos meses o años podemos ver una China que sea más proactiva o activa en reprimir el interés de eso que ellos le llaman la nueva clase, en vez de la clase capitalista.
muy buenas respuestas? Estoy de acuerdo con la mayoría de las cosas que dice, las conclusiones, ¿no? Al final y al cabo, no podemos superar en términos absolutos la situación de contradicciones en las que nos encontramos. Y al final y al cabo, pues China es un país tremendamente complejo.
¿Está afiliado usted con alguna organización allá en España?
Sí, sí, milito en una organización.
En
¿Movimiento socialista le suena de algo?
Movimiento Socialista, ¿cuál es ese?
Es la organización comunista más grande de España,
¿Es el de
precisamente.
Pablo Iglesias?
Pablo Iglesias, no tiene nada que ver con eso. Pablo Iglesias es un político retirado. No
Sí.
tenemos nada que ver. De hecho, movimiento socialista sale de la izquierda versales, la izquierda vasca.
Mm.
Se ha ido fundando en células alrededor de todo el país y se presentó la CJS, que es una sección del movimiento socialista en los territorios españoles, por así decirlo. En
Me imagino entonces
2024.
que no le caiga muy bien al el compañero Santiago Armesillo, ¿no?
No creo. Él forma parte de Vanguardia Española.
Sí, sí, sí. Él es buen amigo mío. Eh, no me voy a meter en las contradicciones de España, pero sí, sí es buen amigo mío y lo defiendo en contra de aquellos que lo llaman fascista, pero sí tiene ideas que entiendo que son un poco provocadoras quizás ahí en la escena que existe en la izquierda. Pero bueno, para aquellos que hablan español y que me están oyendo en español y que lo entienden, eh, tengo un libro que va a salir creo que un mes o dos, que es una conversación que tuve con uno de los economistas principales del movimiento Morena en México, eh, y es sobre cómo adaptar el marxismo-leninismo a esta nueva era digital. Síganme no solo en TikTok, sino también en Instagram para que tengan la notificación de cuando salga el libro. Lo van a poder comprar en todos los países del mundo, sea España, sea Argentina, en todos los países de Latinoamérica o Iberoamérica o Hispanoamérica, como lo quieran llamar. Pero bueno, muchas gracias.
La verdad que, bueno, por decir una cosa más, y ya está. Santiago Armecilla me parece como que dice como cosas muy coherentes y está muy formado en el marxismo, pero la verdad es que no estoy muy de acuerdo con sus conclusiones. O sea, no me parece que la iberofonía, o sea, la unión de los países ibéricos, tales como una alianza geopolítica socialista, alguna especie de cosas así, sea como muy viable en ese sentido.
Sí, eso es lo que yo tengo principalmente en desacuerdo con él, porque nosotros tenemos nuestra propia visión civilizatoria de las Américas, que está en contradicción, pero él es muy buen amigo, muy buen compañero, y es bueno tener personas con las que uno dialoga, ¿no? Y, y que tenga diferencias con uno, ¿no? Si no, todas las conversaciones serían una conversación que uno tiene conmigo mismo, con uno mismo, porque la gente con la que uno hablaría estarían de acuerdo con todo lo que uno piensa y serían conversaciones muy aburridas, ¿no? Eh, pero bueno, muchas gracias, compañero. Cuídese.
Que tenga un buen día. Hasta luego.
Gracias. All right, we're back to English. We're back to the Queen's tongue. What happened to the... Oh, there it is. PDF gratis cuando. Camaradas, yo sé que dije de que allá en Argentina están en el quinto mundo, pero acá somos nosotros los que estamos en el quinto mundo. La cantidad de deuda, de dificultades económicas son muy grandes. O sea, de que sí los voy a hacer pagar unos $5 por el PDF. Y si lo encuentran por la izquierda pirateado, entonces, bueno, se lo van a dar. All right, how do I fix the mic? What's wrong with the mic? Jesus Christ, I hear the echo. There's two other guests, so I'm not gonna bother to fix it. Actually, I want to do the person that's been talking in the chat against us.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. I am aware.
You are what?
The ACP is transphobic. I heard this.
You heard it from where? The grapevine?
Are you familiar with Middleton, Pendletown?
Middleton, Pendletown? Yes.
Yes.
Is this Haas? Is this Haas's
No.
alt? What the fuck is this?
No.
What is this?
But why did you not use the preferred pronouns?
What are your pronouns?
No, of Middletown.
Middletown?
Yes.
Guys, I'm too close to Unk status to be trolled like this. This is honestly inhumane. It's a violation of my human rights. And this is too much. I can't deal with this. Way too much. All right, the Millennial 90. The Millennial, what's up? You have a question? Can anyone hear him? No? Okay. Middleton, Pendleton. Corey's 41.
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Hey, what's up, Corey? Do you have a
What's
question?
up? Yeah, I do. I was wondering what your thoughts were on Jay Loverston's idea of American exceptionalism. And I guess to summarize it, it's just this idea that capitalism in America sort of formed in unusually like favorable conditions that will make any type of socialist movement going to be fairly distinct from Europe and Russia. Wondering what your thoughts are on that, because I do think he probably does get a lot of that right, and he has been vindicated in terms of people kind of being infantilized by, some of the good living conditions that they have here, despite, obviously the ills of capitalism.
Jay Loverston,
Yeah, I believe he was a part of like CPUSA.
it's Jay Lovestone.
Oh,
Uh,
my apologies. My apologies.
yeah, he was part of that Trotskyism to CIA, Trotsky to neocon pipeline. I don't think there's anything uniquely capitalistic about American identity. On the contrary, there's speeches from Thomas Jefferson where he draws a distinction between two types of men. Says there's the aristocratic man who cares about economic privileges, um, and who prioritizes that and property over everything else. And then there's the democratic man, for whom governance and priorities ultimately lie in the people and the people's needs. And he makes the argument that if the former, the aristocratic man, comes to dominate over the American state, then the whole purpose and impetus and goals of the American Revolution would be undermined. Now, we can make the argument that this contradiction, or that we can make the argument that this has happened, that this has been what America has really been for most of its history, with the exception maybe of the period of Reconstruction. Most of its history has been not government of by and for the people, which is just an re-articulation. It's a re-articulation of that Jeffersonian spirit of democracy, which I think it's proto-socialist. It can very easily be turned into socialism, and the first socialists in the United States in the 1820s, William McClure, Cornelius Blatchley, Thomas Skidmore, all these people that no one's ever heard of because we're not taught our history. In fact, I think I'm the only one who has ever written about these people that's alive, and I'm not being hyperbolic. But those first socialists in the 1820s basically developed like an American Marxism before Marx was even writing with Engels, before Marxism even developed. They based it all completely on Thomas Jefferson's understanding of democracy. And they got to speak to Jefferson and they told him about this form of socialism. And Jefferson said that actually, I think this is a faithful extension of my ideas. I don't necessarily think it'll work in a massive state, but I do see it working in indigenous communities, which are communistic, and express my conception of democracy in the form of life to its ultimate extent. So I think that's as much, if not more, of the American spirit and the American identity and American ideals and principles as the de facto form that the country has taken as a capitalist dictatorship. So this is what America is. It's a contradiction. It's a contradiction between ideals and a history of struggle that's very rich and socialistic, which led Lenin to think that America would be the first country to have a socialist revolution, and the de facto leadership of this country, which has almost always upheld the dictatorship of capital with very few exceptions.
Yeah, I guess the contention was not that capitalism is inherent to the American identity, but that capitalism in America, the way it has formed, has led to unusually high living standards, even for some of the lowest people when you compare it to the rest of the world. And that's going to make it particularly resistant to socialist revolution. I was wondering if you agree with that assessment or not.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why. We had, for most of the 19th century, the Western frontier open, which meant that regularly the workers that were in the few industries that were in the eastern part of the country, the labor capital market was somewhat favorable to labor. Workers did get paid fairly well through large parts of the beginning and middle of the 19th century, with few exceptions. And what they would do when they would save up money is go out west. And they would just use that money to build the cabin and have the sort of Emersonian dream of going out west. And this
Sure.
created the horizon of what the American dream was for most of Europe, right? That's why the poor from all of the countries of Europe would come to the U.S. and work for a few years and then go out west and make a life for themselves. Sometimes they would just go out west and do that directly without even accumulating any form of earning before that. And so, yeah, that created conditions where socialism was very hard to develop because people could make a living for themselves with the work of their own hands. But in the 1890s, the frontiers closed, which means that opportunity, done. Most of the property either is private property or state property, and you can't just go out west, build a house for yourself, and be cool. The cost for the means of production to do that are higher. The tools and materials you need to do that are higher. And now you have land rents that you have to deal with. So that dream dies. And for the next 40 years until the 1930s, America's in a very difficult position. And it looks like any moment it could have a revolution through various different means. It wasn't just the Communist Party that was threatening the capacity of having a revolution during the beginning of the FDR administration. It was also people like Huey Long that were extremely popular. He was a governor down in Louisiana, then he gets into the Senate and was building a very, very strong movement of share the wealth and was calling for revolution right before he got mysteriously assassinated by someone. And so FDR was facing the potential for revolution from both the Communist Party and from Huey Long, and there was also a Socialist Party that was still getting over 1 million votes, trade unions that were led by communists. So it was a very sticky situation that FDR was in. And in that context, he decides to subvert the immediate interest of capital and its accumulation and use state funds to, raise taxes on the rich, fund federal programs, and give people some basic crumbs and rights. And that pacifies things for a bit. When you mix that with the fact that the US in the post-war period becomes the global imperial hegemon, which means that from super profits, it can give people more crumbs. When you mix that with the fact that the Soviet Union was presenting itself as an alternative to capitalism that was viable, and therefore the American capitalist class, if it cared at all about its long-term interests, had to give at least the white part of the working class a better living standard. And when you consider the fact that there was a strong labor and socialist movement that was able to fight for those rights, which weren't just given, it was the threat of revolution that led the capitalists to give the concessions. That made it so that their conditions improved. And what happened was that the working class, at least the white part of the working class, was bourgeoisified, which is not a term that I invented. It was already used by Engels to describe parts of the English working class in the 1890s. And when that class becomes bourgeoisified, it's pretty darn pacified. That's why most of the class struggle up until the 60s and 70s was led by the black working class, which was the ones that didn't have the privilege of getting those crumbs that the larger white sector of the working class did get. But something happens around the 1970s and later on. There's a very major crisis in capitalism. And I hope people are taking notes in the comments. Because this is real history shit. This isn't just joking around. There's a very major crisis of capitalism in the 1970s. And the reasons for that crisis are very easy to explain and were predicted by Marx. It was no longer profitable to continue productive industries. The capitalist class was no longer considering it profitable to actually produce things and make their profits from the production of things because labor was extremely expensive. Now they had to deal with this bloated power of banking capital that extracted profits through land rents and interest rates. And so the capitalist class faced a distinctive dilemma in the 1970s. It can either continue making profits from productive enterprises and do so abroad by paying cheaper labor, paying cheaper land rates because you didn't have the same banking capital control the rates and rents and all these different things in other countries. and cheaper raw materials. And a lot of them did that. And most of our jobs, this is what we call neoliberalism. Economically, most of the productive industries go abroad, either to Mexico or Southeast Asia or China, etc. The other option they have is financialization, which means making profit not through this intermedium of actually producing commodities to then realize in the form of profit afterwards and finish the circuit of capital, but to do this skipping that Marx already predicted in Capital Volume 3, which is of going from money to money prime. Instead of going money, commodity, money prime, you go from money to money prime. And how do you do that? Well, by engaging in financialization, by having profits come from stock buybacks, stock manipulations, getting into banking and making profits from interest, or just doing what every major religion would call usury. That's the trajectory that both that those are the two routes that the capitalist class took. And those the reason for them taking those routes are irreversible and were absolutely necessary because they were emanating from the needs of the system to accumulate capital. And the system doesn't care if the capital accumulated is fictitious, like a lot of what is accumulated in the US and a lot of what constitutes GDP growth is. All it needs to do is grow by at least 3% each year, and then, it hangs up its gloves and says, all right, we survived the year. Because if you don't grow by 3%, you're considered to be in a crisis, and that can get scary. The point being that all of this, since the 70s, what it's done is re-proletarianize that proletariat that had been bourgeoisified. And now, for the first time, I think, ever, we are approaching a situation where no, capitalism is not providing material comfort to people like it once did. When you compare it to any medium income or high income country, even to some low income countries, the people here don't live better. In some cases, they live worse. They have less rights. They don't have access to adequate housing. They don't have access to guaranteed health care. They go in tremendous debt if they decide to go get an education. They're encouraged to go get an education, and when they finish it, they don't have a job. God forbid they get sick, they end up in crippling debt. Even just to get by and have a roof over your head and get groceries and do all those things, you need to take out credit. And you ultimately become, like most Americans, a debt slave. And so we're at a predicament now where people are poor, struggling to make ends meet, drowning in unpayable debts, desperate as hell. Crime is rising because of this. Mental health crises are rising. And we're in a predicament that I have called in my writings a comprehensive crisis, which means a crisis that's not just economic in character, but takes all these many different forms. And it's irreversible. It's irreversible because the conditions that produced the crisis were necessary. Nothing else could have been done by capital besides turning into socialism. Nothing else could have been done by capital to defend the logic of accumulation of capital. And so,
Understood, yeah.
if
And,
we were too comfortable to fight for socialism at one point, now we're not. And there's nothing the capitalist class could do.
Yeah, I think I think you make some good points in that assessment. I have two other quick questions if you have some time.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so a big issue for socialism in America, I think, is just the racialism identity in America. And I just think that there's just far too many people and groups that view themselves as their race before their class identity. So like even like a very like a middle class or like a rich black person or a middle class or rich white person, they view themselves as their race before they ever view themselves as their class. How does the ACP plan on kind of combating that type of racialism?
Well, very concretely, I mean, the people that are reinstigating racial divisions in the country, which I think there was a couple decades that they were as dormant and in existence as they've ever been in the U.S. The people that are reinstigating it, we're fighting against them, which is people like Nick Fuentes and all these other white supremacists on X. And then they have their corollaries in like other people in like the black, like Dr. Umar style forms of black identity politics. which emanates from what black Marxist theorists have called the black misleadership class. Combating that by, showing how these people are often psyops and how their ultimate purpose is to get either a black or a white or a Hispanic person to feel like they have more in common with a rich person of their skin color than with a fellow worker or poor person who's of a different skin color. And there's something so fundamentally untrue about that. If you're a black working class person, you have infinitely more in common with a poor working class white, even if they say the N-word, than you do with Jay-Z. That's just a fact. Materially, that's just a fact. The same thing goes for white people. Poor whites have infinitely more in common with black working class people than they do with fucking Bill Gates. It's that simple. And it's always been that simple. But because there was material incentives for the white part of the working class to not accept this, for the reasons I mentioned previously, they were able to look away, But now I think the conditions for a multiracial class struggle are better than ever because the civil rights movement won. A lot of parts of the country are integrated with one another, and um, there's it's more likely for a young white person today, I think, to be anti-racist or to consider racism something to laugh at and to mock than for them to be racist. I know it's becoming less and less true with the psyops of actual racists on X, but I still think for most people, gun to their head, that's how they feel.
I appreciate the optimism, but maybe I just view it fundamentally different because when I even look at the financial crisis of '08, obviously you had, your hippies in the park and they're protesting and, nothing really came out of that. But then you look at, the George Floyd riots and you have millions of people across the nation mobilizing together, massive protests, property damage like crazy. I just don't see class having that same type of mobilizing effect that race does, at least at the current state of the nation.
I don't know. Well, objectively, yeah, it doesn't mobilize people as much as it should, and well, that's why I think a lot of identity politics is reactionary. A lot of like what could be called wokeism. I think it's reactionary because it gets people to think in race first terms at a moment in American history where, thanks to the Civil Rights Act and the Black Freedom Movement, people are less racist than they've ever been in the US. That doesn't mean that there isn't still people that are prejudiced, but it's the conditions for multiracial working class struggle are better than ever. And if on one side the racist psyop in Twitter is reintegrating forms of racial tribalism, on another side the last 15 years of wokeism and of trying to make white people develop white guilt and tiptoe around in their lives and in their activism and do this very performative virtue signaling activism. That sort of wokeism had the same effect except from the other side. It was to tribalize people. And Marxists have to be fundamentally against that.
Yep. Do you have any other guests? Do I have time for one last question?
Let's see. I have one more guess, but ask your last question.
Yeah, this is the last question. So you mentioned Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. Obviously, they are reactionary, they're aggressive, but I do think they do show a pathway to where dissident politics can go from being fringe to mainstream. But we obviously want to replace like the racial consciousness with the class consciousness. And I do see where the ACP is right now is basically where the Groyper movement was pre-2020. I think a lot can change in the next few years. But one thing that Groyperism is doing, are you familiar with like this GIA thing, the Groypers Intelligence Agency? Are you familiar with that? They have this thing where they basically have Groypers and I'm sure you've heard the stats about like DC staffers being groypers and they're undercover and all this stuff, but they have people going in, becoming, advisors for congressional representatives, future policy, advisors or whatever it may be. These are essentially groypers undercover. And obviously, that's not a good replacement for actual revolution. And you actually want to change the institutions that we're talking about. But would the ACP ever consider, maybe promoting people to actually get into politics in that way, in terms of being in Capitol Hill, being in DC, or is that not the path forward for the ACP?
We do plan on running elections locally, but in terms of doing like a psyop of that nature, either through the Democratic Party or the Republican or something like that, no, we don't. Yeah, we don't. We want to build a sovereign left, and to do that doesn't mean not participating in elections, but it means participating under our own flag, or at least a flag that's sovereign to the left. But
Understood.
yeah,
Understood. Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because, I'm young, I'm ambitious, and I see these groypers taking over DC, and it's like
yeah,
we
yeah.
have no representation, like whatsoever. But thank you for taking my questions. Hopefully they weren't too like laboring or anything. But you have a good one. Okay.
Thank you so much. Take care. All right, guys, I have one more guest, but if you're watching, there's 25 of you there. Bro, there's this fucking young guy that debates MAGA people every single day, and he gets like 10,000 people concur, or 40,000 people. I've seen up to 40,000 people watching live. I'm not going to be as blessed by the TikTok algorithm, so if you want me to continue, boost the fuck out of the stream. Spam the like button, share it, do whatever the fuck you have to do, but boost the stream. Let's get it at least to 50 fucking people. And I'll consider continuing, but this is fucking bullshit. We have a better camera. I'll go pound for pound against your favorite TikTok politics people. I'll debate the fuck out of them, wipe the floor with them. Total confidence in that, by the way. So let's get this on people's feet. All right. One more guess. Haifa Vlogs.
Yo.
Hello.
Yo, what's up? Sorry, my name isn't actually Hyper Vlogs. I got banned on my name, from streaming, so I had to make an alt.
What's your
yeah,
question?
yeah. I was gonna ask, like, I wasn't born like 90s, but looking back at like music, 90s, early 2000s, and even like 2010s, it was a lot more politically charged than like you can get away with nowadays. I mean, if we want to go back to like 2000s, I mean, you had Green Day. I mean, they weren't like number one Marxists of all time, but like they had a pretty, solid stance on Bush and the Iraq War. And then, they've never really lived up to their success. I mean, pretty bad albums after. You had the whole punk movement in the 70s, which was very like, a lot of it was anarchism, but, it was still left-wing in nature. And then, even you had Kanye in the 2000s, George W. Bush doesn't care about black people. And now he's like gone full Yahtzee. So
Yep.
do you think like record labels are especially with AI, like I don't really care about AI. I think it's such a stupid debate people have. But like, especially with like record companies like now signing with like AI music, do you think it's like a way to push out like actual I don't think that's the right word, actual creative thought and, politically charged and like any message that goes against the status quo?
I don't know. We just saw that AI song Rubbers go super viral. If we had like a communist version of Rubbers go viral, that would probably do much more for the cause than 300 streams that I could do on TikTok. Um, but yeah, you're not wrong. There seems to be a lot less communist style or dissident style music that doesn't like feel LARPy and cringe when you hear it. Um, there's not many there's not many mainstream musicians. It feels like maybe Macklemore, but he was primarily sympathetic to like just the Palestinian cause. Um, but yeah, there isn't. It doesn't seem like there's much going on.
Is the rubber song the? Oh, it's my money's getting thicker. Is that the
Yep.
one?
My
Oh,
pocket's getting thicker.
that song sounds like they're trying to be like Morrissey. I love it. I don't care if it's AI. I love it so much. But yeah,
It's amazing.
um,
Yeah, I predicted that it was going to be the song of the summer. I think the day it came out.
oh no, it definitely is. But yeah, especially with like what you're saying about LARP music. I mean, where I live in like the UK, there's like a pretty big punk scene, and like that's great. You guys go do your own thing, but it's always like these people like nothing against like gay people. Like I'm by myself, but it's like all the like leftist music is I am gay, I will do crime because I'm so cool and I'm so gay, and we're not gonna talk about anything else in the world. And even like on Palestine, you'll have some like musicians speak out, but you have the big ones at the top like Taylor Swift refusing, despite her probably having like probably one of the most influential platforms somehow. Yeah, it's really weird, especially like with even bands that used to be very politically charged. I mean, they've all either kind of left the charts, or their music is just kind of quite shit now, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like, I mean, I was talking about Green Day. I mean, I like grew up on them, and like even in like 2009 they were talking about like Gaza in their songs, and then you fast forward to 2020 and it's just I don't know. And then again Kanye, was it Vultures? One good song, but yeah, it's a very weird time because I studied music for a bit. I dropped out because I'm like, I'm not going to make any money doing anything in this business. And you're taught the music business, and it was like, if these people tell you to do something with your song, your lyrics, or whatever, you have to like basically abide, or you're getting kicked off the label like immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a general tendency of what happens to culture under capitalism, where uh, I think this is one of the things that Adorno and Horkheimer are correct about when they talk about the culture industry. It's just, commodified cultural productions where you end up just making the sort of pop thing that has worked in the sense of made profit in the past. You just repeat that, repeat that, repeat that. And all of this has intensified across all of the culture industries and really across every single industry in the last 2, 3 decades. Even like the whole, indebting that you have to go into in order to go to school in the US, that's relatively new. That wasn't really around in the 90s. So in the last 2, 3 decades, the logic of capitalism has intensified, not the logic, the extent and reach of commodification has become so broad that it has literally infected everything. And I think in culture, what we end up getting is movies that are slop, music that are often slop, and in general, the absence of any cultural productions that are actually like dissident, that go against the mainstream, that challenge dominant narratives. And when they do it in a way that's compatible with the ruling order, because the ruling order understands people are going to dissent every once in a while, and so it needs forms of dissent that it controls and that help to actually stabilize the ruling order instead of undermine it. And that's what it does. But thank you so much for coming on and for your interesting questions.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it's 6 o'clock, so my words aren't really working out too much. But I hope you have a nice night.
Thank you. Likewise. Bye-bye. You guys hear me? Is there still an echo? I think there is. Testing. Still an echo? Son of a biscuit. Testing. Is the audio better now? I hear an echo on my end. Alright, can you guys hear me now? I just had to mute the. It's getting worse. My religion is communism. Let's see. Thoughts on the national question. Look, we have to understand there's a really good book by Eric Hobsbawm, a British Marxist historian. We have to understand that even the nation state and the understanding of historical groupings as nations, it's a fairly new phenomenon. It's epiphenomenal to capitalism, which means it develops in a way that's tied and determined by the trajectory of capitalism, the need of capitalism to have common markets and institutions that it can impose itself upon at a broad scale. That's where the category of nation really comes from. And at some point, because of the globalizing influence of capital and the inequality that develops between nations, where, the first capitalist nations are imperialist forces and those that capitalism expands itself to are imperialized. What ends up happening is that those in the imperialized countries end up absorbing the intellectual tools and material infrastructure that the imperialist Western nations brought to their shores. And so they start thinking of themselves in terms of nations. And they start struggling against imperialism and capitalism through the very category that was developed by capitalism, which is the category of a nation. And those national liberation struggles are historically very progressive. Sometimes they haven't been. But a lot of the times they have been historically very progressive across Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, etc. Now, there's an inherent limitation to the fact that it's a category that was produced by capitalism, and that it isn't the only category for thinking about large groupings of people. There's also a deeper category of civilization. There's also an old school understanding of empire, which isn't just capitalist empire or imperialism, but an older understanding of empire, like the Mongol Empire. which are different ways of thinking about what makes up the unity either of a people or peoples in plural. The point being, I think the transition that we're seeing globally is towards civilizational arrangements, whether it's as civilizational states like China or as larger civilizational blocks. But I think the form of the nation state itself, and ergo, therefore, the form of national liberation struggle, is going to become more and more superfluous. Arrangements such as the Alliance of Sahel states in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are going to become more and more necessary, and just the spontaneous form that struggles take. I expect this to be common knowledge in a few decades. I think I'm a few decades ahead of time when it comes to this, but I think in a few decades everyone's going to recognize that the nation state form is superfluous, and we have to be thinking in terms of civilizational arrangements. And that's going to be the post-capitalist form of thinking about groupings. All right. I thought you were Catholic. No, not Catholic. Haas is Muslim. I'm not Catholic. I guess I'm culturally Catholic. I'm Tartarian. Liberation theology embraced or not? Yeah, I embrace liberation theology. I think of communism almost as the realization of the insights of some of the most important religions and political philosophies. Communism is the riddle of history solved. But anyways, guys, I hope you like the camera quality. I feel like we were doing better before we had guests on. I don't know if that has anything to do with viewership, but in any case, thank you to all of those who stuck around. You did your best to try to boost this into the algorithm, but the Zionist deep state didn't want you to succeed. In any case, see you all. Take care. Bye bye.